maybe we can talk about your book, The Evolution of God, which, if I were to summarize that book in one sentence, I would say basically God and the concept of God have evolved, and God's a lot more chill now than he was back 500 years ago. But what were the major ideas, or what are the major ideas you were trying to communicate in that book?
One was, as you suggest, to view religion as an evolutionary process and explain that, argue that monotheism did grow almost seamlessly out of earlier religions that were not at all monotheistic. And I had a couple of agendas in the course of telling this story, and I focused on, most of the book is about three big developments within the Abrahamic tradition. Once I tell the story of kind of pre-Abrahamic religion, and get up to the story of ancient Israel and the birth of the emergence of monotheism in Israel, I then move on and tell the story of the birth of Christianity and the birth of Islam. So that's the narrative. But my agenda certainly included conveying something that I think is very important. I started thinking about this book in the aftermath of 9/11, and my own view of the connection between religion and, I guess, belligerence. And I think this is something that the new atheists, including Richard Dawkins, get wrong.
Yeah.
Is they think that, like, religion is the problem. When you have, like, militant, Islam, if you have radical Muslims or radical Christians or radical anything else, they think if you could only turn them into atheists, everything would be fine.
Yeah.
My view is no, actually, usually they just have grievances, and whatever religion they happen to have is going to be the medium through which that's expressed. So what I tried to show in The Evolution of God was that basically, with any religion, whatever the text, I don't mean that the text doesn't matter. I don't mean it doesn't matter whether your basic text is the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament or the Quran. They do have different characteristics that are not completely without importance. But I think basically any religious group, if you want them to find in their scripture the basis for being charitable toward another group and friendly toward another group, and go find those passages in the scripture that say, be kind to the stranger, and so on, you have to put them in a non-zero-sum relationship with the other group. In other words, give them the sense that there can be a win-win relationship between you. It could be a commercial relationship, like we can literally do business. That's a great source of amity between people, is to convince them that they can mutually profit, or that maybe they can unite to fend off some common threat. But the point is, if they view you as threatening, they are going to find in their scripture a basis for hating and killing you.
Yeah.
We hope it won't go that far, but that's when this kind of thing tends to happen. And if they don't view you as threatening, whatever their religion is, they're much less likely to find a basis for belligerence in the religions. I think rather than do what the new atheists want to do, which is try to convince people that they're fools for believing in the God, try to structure the world such that people can gain through interaction. And so that was one big agenda. There's also, separate from that, the fact that my own belief, although I've lost my Christian faith, I do believe that when you look at the direction of biological evolution and subsequent cultural evolution, although I explain those things in strictly materialist, conventional terms, Darwinian natural selection, I view cultural evolution as, in a sense, a material process that obeys certain laws. It still seems to me that the direction of the whole process is suggestive of the possibility that it does serve some larger purpose. I've argued that, although in a way as an afterthought in both of these books, but I've argued that in Non-Zero and in the evolution of God. So in a way, one of the arguments in the evolution of God is that even if we stand back and view the evolution of religion in these very clinical terms, the way a social scientist might, that doesn't mean there's no higher purpose. You don't necessarily have to abandon the notion of a higher purpose or of transcendent meaning, or however you want to put it.
And I think the important point, tell me if I'm characterizing this correctly. The important point, one of the important points in the evolution of God is you weren't really speaking to the divine itself. You were speaking more to people's conception of the divine and how that evolves over time. So for instance, I think it's, if I'm remembering right, and I'm not a biblical scholar by a long shot, but I think it was is it Leviticus where they have love thy neighbor? In any event, everybody's pretty familiar with the concept of love thy neighbor. Well, back when those words were written, your neighbor was literally your family. It wasn't the people in the tribe next door. And so that concept, I think, is a good example of one of the things you were talking about that evolves over time. Like, in other words, it's not necessarily the words in the text themselves. It's the situation in which, it's the circumstances in which those words are read and interpreted. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I think so. The religions tend to serve certain social functions. And that's why I think as you move from in a hunter-gatherer society, enforcing the law, so to speak, there is no written law or anything, but enforcing the rules is not really a huge challenge. It's not like you can steal somebody's stuff and run away.
Yeah.
or
You could, but you'd last about 2 days, right?
And it's by and large, it's a small society where everyone knows who everyone is. It's hard to do things secretly and in private. So a lot of the kind of law enforcement problems that you see in larger societies don't exist, at least in very large magnitude. And so I think it's no coincidence that it's mainly when you get to the larger ancient kind of urban societies or even chieftain level societies, but certainly the ancient urban societies, where you start seeing religions that offer more rewards and punishments for good and bad behavior. You don't see as much of that in the hunter-gatherer religions, and including the idea that the afterlife, there will be rewards in the afterlife for people who don't steal and don't cheat and so on. And that's an example of, I think, the part of religion evolving to meet the needs of the social structure. And other ideas also evolve to meet those needs. And I think right now we're in a time where the world as a whole we need to see new ideas evolve that are conducive to a kind of congealing at the global level, at least to enough harmony at the global level that we can solve the growing number of problems that I think can be solved only through international cooperation. We need evolution of ideas and so on to continue. And that's the one thing I'm interested in.